Welcome back to the Dr. Tree Fruit and Dawn podcast. I'm Dr. Kari Peter, and it is May 7th, 2024. Don Seaford is still on dad duty, taking care of his little fruitlet. But today we have Dr. Greg Krawczyk here. Greg, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
And Dr. Shan Kumar. Say hi, Shan.
Hello, everyone.
So we've got a pretty good update for you to cover the horticultural aspects of tree fruit, the diseases of tree fruit, and of course the insects of tree fruit. So without further ado, we're just going to jump right in, and I'm going to turn things over to Shan to give you a much needed horticultural update. So Shan, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. It is glad to be back here. Thanks, Gary, for inviting me. I just wanted to continue with my thinning updates for the state of Pennsylvania. Last week, we had a major thinning season here in southern Pennsylvania. I'm going to start from southern Pennsylvania, move up to southeast PA, and then to Rock Springs, kind of central Pennsylvania, and then to like the west and northeast. So starting with Biglerville, most of or in Adams County and surrounding counties, a lot of your thinning for the major varieties happened last week with thinning sprays on Wednesday and Thursday. And based on the carbohydrate model in NUA, it seemed like one of the best times to go thin your fruit. But this week as well in Biglerville, we are thinning some other varieties that we missed last week, and also other varieties that are lagging behind. And based on the carbohydrate model, we are seeing that it is in a not so ideal thinning weather, but because the carbohydrate model that shows for Biglerville, it shows that we do not have a carbohydrate deficit much this week. Carbohydrate deficit is a 6-day weighted average of the carbohydrate deficit. Usually thinning happens best when you have the carbohydrate deficit between -40 and -60 gram per day. But based on the weather and the cloudiness and based on the forecast, it seems like it does not fit within that range. However, things are growing very fast because of the temperatures, and we do not have an option of not spraying, even though we might not have the most ideal conditions in Biglerville and surrounding areas. So I would still go ahead and suggest to spray the standard rates of chemicals that you normally use for the different varieties. I would note that the temperature is 70s, low 80s. And so it is ideal for compounds like 6-BA. And also you can use NAA and combinations of them with carbaryl for thinning the various varieties. And so I would still suggest to go ahead and do your thinning for the varieties if you haven't done any thinning sprays last week. We are at around, when we measured yesterday in FREC, we were around approximately 12 millimeter in size for most of the common varieties, the Fuji, Honeys, Golds, Reds, and Gala. And so we are at that right stage to thin if you haven't done any thinning last week. So I would still suggest to go ahead and thin. Now, moving on to the Southeast PA, they are about a few days behind. So Don just sent me the average measurements from an orchard down there in Southeast PA. And most of them are around 7 millimeters. Most of the varieties are around 7, 6, 8 millimeters. So they are also at a right stage for thinning. And when I ran the carbohydrate model for that region, this is a perfect time for thinning those varieties right now. Once again, I repeat that in Southeast PA, this is the time for thinning your varieties, because the carbohydrate model also shows a thinning of between -40 and -60 gram that deficit. So go ahead and thin your varieties with 6-BA plus carbaryl or NAA plus carbaryl, or any other options that you have for thinning. The temperatures are good for 6-BA, for using 6-BA. That would be Maxell or Exilis or compounds like that. And so this is the right time. This is a week for going ahead and thinning, especially in Southeast PA. When we move up to central Pennsylvania to, for example, the Rock Springs orchard, things are still a bit slow at around 2 to 3 millimeter, 2 to 4 millimeters in size. So we're still at that petal fall stage. We are at petal fall, but somewhat in the early petal fall because we still have bloom on some varieties. So, and we are seeing a lot of damage from the frost that happened about a week and a half ago at Rock Springs, central Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania. And so we are having variable bloom. Some varieties seem to have pushed through, and some varieties, especially in the colder region of Rock Springs. So we have 2 orchards in Rock Springs. One area gets more colder than the other. And so that area, we seem to have lost a lot of the bloom to frost, and we almost have no crop there. So I would highly suggest you to go and assess your crop load in each block, because each block can vary depending on where it is located. And I would still suggest to wait a little bit until next week, because we seem to have good thinning weather next week as well for central Pennsylvania and west and northeast, because we still want to get to that 7 or 8 millimeters in size before we start with thinning. And so I would just say stay put and hope for good weather and no more frosts for our region, for our central, western, and northeast Pennsylvania. And stay tight till next week, and then we'll assess and go from there. That's it for me today.
So a couple of questions, Shan, because I always like learning about the whole chemical thinning, because I really do see it as a voodoo art, because there is an art to thinning. So I'm just curious, for the people who thinned last week, when should they start looking at their trees to see if the thinners worked, like the fruitlets that they didn't want are falling off the trees? Like, when is the timing? When's the sweet spot to determine, oh, my thinners worked. Oh no, my thinners didn't work.
So usually that's the thing with thinners. It is not very easy to go in and check, say 1 week after, to see how well your thinner worked, because they take their time to work, sometimes even 2 weeks. And by that time, you might not be still able to apply thinners because they have been past the 15, 20 millimeters, even for rescue thinning. So it is very difficult to assess exactly, unless you leave some trees that you don't spray with. And even then, it will still take about 2 weeks to see that effect of the thinners. So in Michigan State, I think, and Cornell combined together, they developed a model in order to assess this. It's slightly time consuming, where they say that any fruitlet that hasn't grown more than 50% of the king bloom will fall off. So sorry, any fruitlet that is less than 50% of the size of the king bloom, it will fall off. So that is maybe one way to kind of visually assess the individual cluster and see, which ones are less than 50% of the king bloom. So that is one way to do. And they have a model where you enter that data into that model, and it gives you, what the set would be. But that is the tricky part with thinning, right? Like, you won't know until 2 weeks later how well your thinning worked. And by that time, there's not much you can do except for hand thinning to be able to thin those fruitlets, which is why it is very important to use models such as the carbohydrate thinning model, because a lot of these hormone thinners are based on the carbohydrate status of the tree. If you do not have a deficit, you will not be able to thin, even if you have good temperatures, 70s, 80s. Because if the tree does not have a carbohydrate deficit, we will not be able to thin, which is what happened a lot of the time last year, where we did not have a carbohydrate deficit just because of that cool weather that we had throughout that growing period.
Okay, so I know we've got a lot of seasoned listeners listening and who understand what like carbohydrate model and carbohydrate deficit, but could you just give like a brief synopsis of like what is it? What does it mean when you have a carbohydrate status of a tree, and also how do you use said status for the model?
Sure.
Might be a review for some folks, but I always like hearing it again, because it usually takes me 5 times to remember what it means.
Sure. So when you talk about a carbohydrate status of the tree, carbohydrates just mean the the sugars that are produced in the tree through photosynthesis. And you have the leaves that are the carbohydrate sources, that's where a lot of the carbohydrates are produced. And then you have the sinks, like fruitlets, like roots, like other parts of the tree that's growing. So during bloom and after that, when the fruitlets are growing, that's when you have the highest carbohydrate stress in a tree. So where, we have a limited amount of carbohydrates because that's when the leaves have started growing. But then, you have a lot of these things competing with each other for carbohydrates because the fruitlets want to grow, the tree wants to grow, the leaves, other leaves, as well as the roots. So that is why we have this carbohydrate stress. And as you know, carbohydrate stress increases when you have a very sunny day because you have more sun, you have more carbohydrates that are being produced in the leaves, and then you have more carbohydrates to be shared with the different parts of the tree. Whereas if you have somewhat of a cloudy day, or you had a series of cloudy days where there is less stress on the tree because there is vice versa. There is less sun, there's less photosynthesis, there's less production of carbohydrates. And so there is less carbohydrate stress on the tree. And the way a lot of these hormone thinners work, be it 6-BA or NAA or other compounds, they create a stress on the tree. And so when you have that stress combined with the carbohydrate status of that tree, and if the carbohydrate status of that tree is pretty strong, like for example, between 40 and minus 60 grams per day, that's when, based on past 10 years of research, you see a great thinning effect, or a good thinning effect you see, because combined with the hormones as well as the carbohydrate stress of that day, that's when the thinners work best. And you can do all of this very easily using the NEWA weather model. That's the newa.cornell.edu, newa.cornell.edu. And you just need to enter 3 things for the carbohydrate model. One is the green tip date. One is the full bloom date. The other is percent flowering spurs. And that doesn't mean you have to go and count exactly how many spurs are flowering, but rather it just asks you for a range. Is it 50 to 75% or 75 to 100%? So that's where you come in and talk about set, right? In the beginning, during bloom, you'll know, especially season growers around big level know as soon as they see the bloom, whether it's strong or light set year. So you can enter that data as well. And that's just three categories: 25 to 50, 50 to 75, 75 to 100. So as soon as you click that, it gives you with a screen of a few things. It gives you the maximum minimum temperature, the solar radiation, but the most important thing to see there is the tree carbohydrate status, and it gives you a 6-day weighted average. So it's 2 days before you spray and then 4 days after you spray. Those 6-day weighted average of the carbohydrate status is the most important thing to look at, where it's ideally between minus 40 and minus 60 grams per day, because if it goes more than minus 60, there is a chance of over thinning. If it goes less than minus 40, you might not see much thinning effects. So that is one thing. The other thing to look at is also accumulated degree days, 4 degrees Celsius since bloom. And a long-term study by Terence Robinson's group has shown that thinning happens most efficiently between 200 and 250 degree days. And after bloom with the 4 degrees Celsius degree days. So you see that year to year, it can vary from, like late bloom, early petal fall to about fruitlets at 15, 16 millimeter size. So they vary between years, but it seems like that thinning at that time seems to happen well, maybe because it coincides with the minus 40 to minus 60 6-day weighted average for tree carbohydrate status. And that's when you get a good thinning effect, or the thinning effect that you ideally expect to see from using your thinners. And times when you do not have that effect, it is most probably because you do not have that deficit carbohydrate status in order for these thinners to be efficiently work and reduce the crop load in your tree.
Okay, great. So, so quick question. I have never used the NEWA carbohydrate model. Now, with that, it sounds like you could do one block at a time, like especially if you've got blocks that are blooming at different times. So that it sounds like you can just tailor it. You can put in your information specific to a specific block.
Yes, Kari, that's a great point. It is true that it is just for a particular block or as big of a block you want it to be. And if you log in and create your account, you can actually save blocks. So you don't have to enter things every time. The second time you enter it, you can just directly go to your block and see what's up for today. And of course, there is a caveat with this model. It is only as good as the weather forecast is. So you should always take this model with a grain of salt, but it does give you, on average, a very good idea of whether there is a carbohydrate deficit for you or not. And you can make decisions based on that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that explanation. I understand that a lot better now. Like I said, it usually takes me 5 or 6 times to hear something to finally understand it. And my one last question for you. How big is too big to be able to use chemical thinners on fruitlets?
So, usually the ideal thinning is between 10 to 12 to 13 millimeters. And then we have rescue thinning from 15 to 20 millimeters. Above 20 millimeters, you do have some products that work minimally. For example, ACC acid, or they have this new compound that's yet to be registered, metametron, which is Brevis, which they claim to have some effect at that late stage as well. But to be honest, above 20 millimeters, you've missed your chemical thinning window. 20 millimeters is a maximum. So that could be anywhere late next week for big level.
Yeah.
So, which is why you don't have very many options during thinning. If you have cool weather and you don't have good thinning, then it's very difficult to get it to thin. Which is why we also suggest that the day you get good weather, even if it's slightly earlier at 6-7 millimeter, go ahead and thin. And that is what I think a lot of growers around your region in Big Level did last week.
Yeah, I agree. I knew a lot of people were thinning. I mean, we were thinning here at Freck. So,
Yes.
well, so yeah, take-home messages, folks, is the weather is influencing fruit size, and fruits go fast or grow very fast. So, we're in this sweet spot for thinning. Sounds like across the state. So, I don't envy Shan's position of making thinning recommendations. When I would listen to Jim Shoup or Rob Cresswell give thinning recommendations, it always would stress me out, and I wasn't the grower having to worry about making these thinning applications because I know how tricky they can be. So thank you so much for all that really good information. I mean, it helped me understand a lot of things better, and I know it'll help our listeners too. So, all right, folks. So take-home messages here. Pay attention to those fruitlets because you are in the window for thinning. We're using chemical thinners being effective. So, and also use that if you are near a new weather station, check that out as far as the carbohydrate model, because that is a useful tool for folks to utilize. So, okay, so on to diseases. So we are in an interesting period right now for tree fruit diseases. So let's talk about apples first. So we are well past petal fall. And so what does that mean as far as typically the certain diseases that are peaking or not peaking right now? So, I think folks are anywhere from bloom to petal fall right now throughout the state, or post petal fall. So apple scab right now, depending on where you're at, if you're blooming or just slightly past bloom, you are at the peak of apple scab spores, the max number of available spores from those overwintering leaves being available. And we've got wonderful conditions this week with regards to apple scab infection conditions, and also for the ability of those mature spores to be able to disperse from those overwintering leaves. For folks in the southern part of the state who are well past petal fall, we are in the tail end of apple scab. So apple scab spores, they peak and then they drastically drop off. And it's not gradual. It's like they drop off. And looking at the models, I mean, we had some pretty good dispersal events in the month of April with regards to apple scab infection events and the max number of spores being available. So this was a good scab year. As far as for folks that are in the bloom post petal fall, you still want to be on alert for apple scab right now. So it's the Frac 7s that I want folks to be using. So that's like your Your Luna Flex has Frac 7, Luna Tranquility has Frac 7. You've got Aprovia Miravis or Tesseris. I was about to say Circadus, but it's Tesseris now. Excalia is also good as well. You can also use the Frac 3s and 9s like Inspire Super, Vanguard, Scala, depending on how you pronounce it, Sevia, Indar at the highest rate possible. And as you may notice, I did not mention any Frac 11s in this bunch of fungicides here. The reason why is that on the heels of apple scab dropping off, we are now in the Marsanina blotch or apple blotch primary infection period. So when the apple scab spores drop off drastically, this is when Marsanina ramps up. And we are in wonderful conditions for Marsanina blotch right now. And so I don't want folks pulling their foot off of the gas pedal thinking, apple scab's over. I can stretch my intervals. I don't have to worry as much. No, you don't. You still have to worry because Marsanina blotch is a very aggressive foliar disease that can defoliate leaves very, very quickly. So you still want to be keeping your intervals tight, especially for those people who use alternate row middle, which I'm not a fan of, but I know people do use it, is when they're spraying, doing half sprays, half a tree. They come back in a few days later and spray the other half of the tree. You got to keep those intervals very tight, especially when we're in this pretty much persistent wet conditions for about a week right now. It's very important. By disrupting the primary infection period of Marsanina blotch, you won't be chasing it during the summer. If it gets established right now, you're going to be chasing it all summer, meaning you're going to have to be really mindful of the fungicides that you're putting on, making sure they don't get washed off, or if they do get washed off, you're reapplying them. So it becomes a real big headache during the summer. And then there's a really big risk of premature defoliation at the end of the season, especially when you harvest and no longer go into the orchard to spray anymore. So you don't want trees to become defoliated in September. I can tell you from personal experience that when you do have apple trees premature defoliate, it really messes up with your fruiting buds. I know this for a fact because of my experiments with Marsanina blotch. I've really messed up some on my trees and have had to really baby them the last year or two to bring them back so they're actually producing enough fruit to do experiments. So right now, keep your intervals tight. I know Greg always teases me about how I tell people to spray all the time. Well, when the conditions are present, you got to get out there and be making sure that you are applying your fungicides appropriately and being mindful of how much rain has fallen. So, you're spraying, the ideal time is spraying right before a wedding event. You typically can, depending on how much rain falls, you might get about 2 inches of rainfall. You're definitely want to be going in there sooner rather than later. Over the weekend in Biglerville, we had an inch and like 1.25 inches fall over the weekend. And I know a lot of people were putting on sprays late last week, and it's continuing to rain this week. So definitely another spray would be warranted by the end of the week here in South Central Pennsylvania. For the rest of the state, I know there's rain throughout the whole state, so just it's a matter of monitoring what is at your location. The other fungal disease on apple that can be problematic is rust. We're on the tail end of the rust galls being active. So again, tank mixing with Manzate Pro Stick, and, or some similar rain-fast mancozeb is going to pretty much keep that disease in its tracks as far as stop it in its tracks with regards to places that have problems with rust. And let me see, as far as fire blight, moving into fire blight now. This has been a tough year for fire blight, and I know someone got fire blight. We had throughout the area during the bloom time, at least during the southern part of the state who had bloom around the same time, we had some pretty good infection periods. We had one April 15th to the 17th and also April 29th through about May 1st. We had another one, over the weekend was also a fire blight infection, in addition to from this week onward, as far as May 8th through May 11th, it's also showing forecasts. So if you've got straggler blooms or you're in some kind of bloom, don't mess with fire blight because this will be a tough year, and it's going to be interesting to see how everything shakes out. So as far as what you want to be applying, streptomycin still works. I really advocate for people to also tank mix with a plant defense elicitor, or also something else like Apogee or Kudos, which will harden off the shoots within about 10 to 14 days. That will hopefully stop any fire blight in its tracks with regards to any blossom blight that may occur, because those hardened off shoots won't get infected because the cell walls are thickened, and Erwinia does not like thick cell walls, so it won't be able to penetrate. As far as other products to be thinking, if you are in bloom, Actigard definitely will give you a lot of bang for your buck. It's an expensive product, but it works. Out of all of the plant defense elicitors, that's probably your best one. There are other ones like Lifeguard. You definitely have to get that on within 48 hours of an infection event. And there's also Vasaplant, which is another plant defense elicitor that I've found that works best on big older trees, like big semi-dwarf trees. But as far as the disease pressure, the strength of the disease pressure right now, if you've had fire blight in the past, I would just stick with Actigard as far as the plant defense elicitor, because that really does give a really powerful plant defense elicitor punch. And you need that in addition to your streptomycin, because streptomycin kills the bacteria, whereas the Actigard is beefing up the defenses in order to sort of keep any straggler Erwinia at bay from really taking root and causing infection. As far as for folks who are well past bloom, I would recommend you start scouting now, because of the said very good infection periods we had. What you want to be looking for are blackened blossoms. Also look at the spur leaves. See if any of the spur leaves have blackened veins or a little bit of black at the base of the spur leaves, or the petioles being black. This is a telltale sign of a fire blight infection. If you see it, prune it out quickly. Don't prune out during wet weather, because you'll just spread the bacteria around. But I would really recommend people to start aggressively scouting, because we've had the conditions. And so if you need to triage, focus on blocks that have a history of fire blight first. As far as organic options right now, if people have made it through bloom and you want to be looking for something that slows down fire blight, especially shoot blight, we have seen good luck with Quava at 2 quarts per the acre. It doesn't eliminate the shoot blight, but it does slow it down. So it's better than nothing, especially during these really optimal periods. And then, as I realized, going back to the fungal diseases, sulfur is your best friend for the organic growers. And so if you are an organic grower and you are growing scab-resistant varieties, your trees might be resistant to apple scab, but they are not resistant to Marsanina blotch. So please, please, please make sure you're putting sulfur on those apple scab-resistant varieties. Sulfur is the only organic option as far as being able to manage Marsanina blotch very well. And now quickly going into stone fruit. Goodness, I mean, we're just in the best conditions for diseases. So as far as cherry leaf spot, that is the apple scab of tart cherries. So I hope folks are protecting those trees well. Back spot, bacterial spot, these are good bacterial spot conditions. You can use a rotational program for bacterial spot. You can use copper products. You want to use a rate of 0.5 ounce to 1 ounce of metallic copper per acre. So you're going to be looking at how much metallic copper content is in the copper that you're using. You can rotate that with Serenade ASO or double nickel. Regalia. Regalia does cause some spotting, I have noticed personally, even with different formulations of Regalia. So just be mindful of that. But those are good rotation partners. Also, oxytetracycline. For the folks that have peaches and nectarines, Oxytet is legal on that. You can use that as a rotation partner. But I want to put on the alert that copper products are going to work really, really well in these slow drying conditions. This is a general biocide. They're going to be killing bacteria, going to be killing fungi, also be killing plant cells. So you don't want I would discourage you putting on copper products during these slow drying conditions. You want to wait for slightly more drier conditions or more dry days in between the wetting days. As far as brown rot goes, to keep the spore load down, you can be using Captan and sulfur. That's really all you need to worry about right now, as far as just keeping that latent spore load out there. So just to quickly review, because as I'm going through my head, I realized I forgot a few things. For fungal diseases on tree fruit right now, since we have great conditions for the disease, which is warm, humid, wet conditions right now, the fungicides to focus on are your FRAC group 3s, FRAC group 7s, FRAC group 9s. So you want to be using them in a rotation. These are products that are going to work against the straggler scab coming out, or the little bits of scab coming out, but also Marsanina blotch. These are the best products for Marsanina blotch. I mentioned I didn't say any FRAC 11s, and the reason why I didn't say FRAC 11s because this product does not work against Marsanina blotch. Save the FRAC 11s for the summer. Fire blight, start scouting. You're going to be treating any trees that have any straggler bloom or, look a little touchy with bloom. And especially for people who are more in the full bloom petal fall stage, be mindful. Stone fruit, you don't forget about your stone fruit trees as far as treating for diseases. Cherry leaf spot, back spot, and brown rot are still of concern right now. I'm sure I missed something, but that's what I can think of at the moment that's on my mind. I'm sure other things will pop up probably within the week as we go through our spring meetings this week. So with that, I am going to turn things over to insects to Greg Krawczyk. So Greg, I'm going to give you the word or the floor for insects.
Thank you, Kari. Gosh, where should I start? We talk a lot in the past edition of this podcast about monitoring. And I really think right now, if you do monitor, you actually can manage your insecticide program the way how it's going to be effective for you. At the same time, it can be a cost effective. Why I'm saying this? Well, if you know your population, the oriental fruit moth pressure, you have your traps, and you see that there is a lot of oriental fruit moth, and a lot of, it might be defined different ways. For some people, it will be 10, and for some people, it will be 120. But the point is, if you see oriental fruit moth still flying, despite that NUA will tell you that it's too late to control them, that's not the case. Because according to NUA, you should not control oriental fruit moth anymore. But when you're catching 120 moths in last week trap data, it means that those females, we're collecting only males, but there might be the same number of females. They laid those eggs also in last week, and those eggs are ready to hatch or will be hatching at any point in the next few days. Shan already mentioned the way how fast the fruit are growing right now. I remember old graph from, 1930s or something, basically saying that at this time of the year, the diameter of the fruit is basically increasing almost 100% from week to week. This is weather dependent. But when you think about it, whatever you did trying to control insects a week ago, right now, this insecticide is stretched, insecticide or fungicide that you're trying to use on fruit. That might not be the case for the leaves. But for fruit, this insecticide is basically not present on the fruit anymore because fruit increased the size by half, by 100%, which basically means they are like 2 fruit at the time. So remember about it. Why I'm saying this? Well, plum curculio, which moved to the orchard in the bloom, is still moving to the orchard. The best model we have tells us that that we should control plum curculio at least until those 300+ degree days after the petal fall on Macintosh. Well, we are at the moment at about 150 degree days, base 50, and I'm using the cod-link moth degree days because this is the same base. So I would say that if you had plum curculio problem in the past, you probably should keep your guard up at least for another 2 weeks. Assuming the weather will stay the way the forecast is predicting, we should be done with curculio in 2 weeks. Again, it's a plus minus, but the point is, this is the most important time trying to prevent injury caused by plum curculio. And this is for both apples and peaches. I said this many times, if the apples are infected or injured by the ovipositional scars that females plum curculio do, the chance that you will find the larva inside the fruit is 0. You will not see developing curculio larva in apples or pears, although you will see injuries as the season goes, that they will get bigger and bigger. Different story is on all stone fruit. Wherever there is a scar, there will be wormy fruit with larvae, curculio larvae present in the fruit in next few weeks, and basically going close to the harvest. I have seen curculio larvae in cherries, sour cherries, and apricots when they were ready to harvest. So this is something you have to remember about. I already mentioned cod-link moth, but if we forget the date in the calendars, it seems like cod-link moth this year should be controlled exactly as we said in the past. The cod-link moth started flying during the bloom. The first petal, the first cover spray, which is usually 2 weeks after the bloom, is the time to control cod-link moth. For us, down here, based on the degree day accumulation and what NUA is predicting, for us, the first timing to control cod-link moth will be sometime mid next week. When the temperature is in the 80s, we're accumulating 20 plus degree days. When the temperature are in the 60s, we are accumulating less than 10 degree days per day. At the moment, we are at about 150, 160 degree days. So plus minus another 5-7 days. Combining insecticides with fungicide is a perfectly good option. There are not too many situations when you should not do it. So think about it as maybe going together. Saying this, be careful about this increase in size of the fruit. Again, if the fruit keep increasing as they are, stretching the intervals between the insecticide applications will leave fruit unprotected. So this is something to remember. It's too late to control European apple sawfly. The green peach aphid or rosy apple aphid, well, if you see them, you can control them. If you don't, then just don't. There's no need to control aphids if they are not showing up on the trees. And remember, if your insecticides are selective, the good chance is there will be enough lady beetles who are coming out right now from your houses, well, probably 2 weeks ago, that are very hungry, and they're looking for the aphids. And they will find the aphids on the trees, and they will establish their colonies there. But as soon as they're done with the aphids, they will move somewhere else. What to use? Well, neonicotinoids, stuff like Asail, like Actara, Venom, those products will control oriental fruit moth. They will help you with plum curculio. They will control aphids. And this is important. So don't think about each insect and different product. Think what you can get, what insect species you can get by using a single product. I usually don't like when companies are introducing the mixture of insecticides, because I think growers know better if they do or do they need to use different products to control different pests. However, saying this, the next week codling moth application, if you're planning on using diamides, and diamides, the products like Altacor, Exirel, it might be also a good time to use mixture of those products. Volium Flexi is a mixture of Altacor and Actara. And Volium Flexi Actara level is high enough that it will also control plum curculio. Besiege is a mixture of Actara and Warrior. I don't like using pyrethroids if we don't have to, but it will also help you with plum curculio and will work as well as Altacor on itself on codling moth. Another diamide is Exirel, and Exirel by itself has efficacy against plum curculio. Of course, it's a great codling moth, great oriental fruit moth product, but it also has efficacy against plum curculio, and it also will help you with controlling Persilla on pears. Saying this, Mimecto is a mixture of Exirel and Agrimec. So using this especially on pears, makes sense at this time of the year. This might be the only time when I say that this might make sense, but those mixtures, Volium is Altacor plus Actara. Besiege is Altacor plus Warrior. Minecto is Exirel plus Agrimec. This might be the only time during the whole season when using those mixtures makes sense. Remember, all of them are diamides. They have the diamide component at the rate. And it's important that if you use diamides right now, try to avoid using them later on in the season. So you either use diamides right now to control codling moth, to control oriental fruit moth, to control leaf miners, to control leaf rollers, or you use them later in the season and then don't use them right now. It's very important. We have those example of diamide resistance in some of our orchards. It's not widespread, but some orchards have problem with it. So remember about rotation. Your best rotation with diamides is delegate. And you either use delegate now and diamides later, or what I would probably prefer with the potential issue of resistance, use diamides now and delegate later. Why I'm saying this? Well, if we miss something right now, we still have the rest of the season to correct what did not work. If we use the best products right now, we might not have those tools later on, especially if there is a resistance to diamides. I have two more things I want to mention. Syngenta is coming with the products that have the old name, but with the addition of word Evo. I mentioned this during the Twilight meetings, and I'm planning to mention this at every meeting I will go, but it's important to remember Avant Evo and Avant are to be used exactly at the same rates. There is difference in formulation. However, the amount of active ingredient in Avant or Avant Evo is the same. So the rate is the same. Why I'm stressing this out is Altacor Evo actually has double the rate of active ingredient compared to normal Altacor. So if you're planning to use Altacor Evo, remember about checking the label, and you will find there that basically all the rates recommendation for Altacor Evo are about 50% lower than the recommendation that you used to when you were using Altacor. So that's another one thing. And then the other thing is, Kari mentioned this and Shan is talking about it, and I will say it again, rain. The amount of rain we are getting might reduce the efficacy of insecticides because those products are simply being washed out. It's not that, they are washed out like a dust. They're losing complete activity. But if you take into account that the fruit are growing, if you take into account that we're getting those rains again and again, we are losing the effectiveness of the products. Please remember about it when you decide what you need to do the next time. Kari mentioned organic, so let me also say organic right now. For those of you who are interested in organic protection of your fruit from insects, your organic products to use at this time is Dipel, which will help you with any leaf or fruit feeding, the surface feeding of the fruit. You do have granulosis virus, which is either Virosoft or Madex or Sidex, that will help you in controlling codling moth, with some efficacy also against the oriental fruit moth. And then using natural pyrethrum or natural pyrethrum mixed with Surround will just control stuff like plum curculio, maybe will help with Persilla, those kind of things. So those are your only options that are organically approved and you can use in your orchards. Mating disruption is approved for organic production, the same as it is for conventional. If you worry about codling moth and oriental fruit moth or peach tree borer or dogwood borer, the mating disruption products are available, and it's late, but it still makes sense to put them out if you worry that you will not be able to be effective with insecticides. That's really all I have for today. Sorry for this being a little bit longer than normal, but I try to, keep you updated as good as I can. So thank you, Kari, for having me again here.
Oh, hold on. I got some questions.
Oh,
So,
man,
yeah. I got to keep you on your toes here. And I got to do Don's seat justice because he always asks really good questions. So first, I just want to emphasize a couple things Greg said. First, tank mixing fungicides and insecticides are okay. You can do that. One thing to be mindful of is the adjuvants that you may be including in said tank mix. So make sure that the adjuvants that you are using are compatible with both the fungicides and the insecticides. So I'm glad Greg had mentioned that. The other thing that he had mentioned, which I think is a very good point to reinforce, is the fact that the trees are growing and we're getting a lot of rain. So when you are applying your protection out there, there's a very high probability that as the tree is growing, there's new growth out there that is not being protected in that time frame because that said growth was not there when you applied your protection. So this is something to be extra mindful of, especially right now because we have these really great conditions for growing right now. I mean, the trees are just going gangbusters. So it's something to be really mindful of as far as that new growth and that new growth being protected. Because at least for fungicides, we are not applying any fungicides that are truly systemic, meaning that it is when you apply it to the tree, it's moving to the growing parts of the tree. That's not happening. The parts of the tree that are being protected are the ones that are there in that moment. So you do sort of get this local systemic action for fungicides where the chemical is going to be penetrating the top layer of the leaf and moving down to the bottom layer of the leaf in some cases, but it's not going to be moving to net new growth. In the case of insecticides, Greg, as far as the mode of action, as far as the systemic nature, are there any insecticides that are moving to that new growth, or the majority of just sticking locally, being locally systemic?
They are mostly local, and the important part is that especially the most important insects right now that we're trying to protect the fruit from, codling moth, oriental fruit moth, uh, they don't, none of the product that is active is systemic. They only surface, the only chance for the altacord, for delegate, for the virus, even for the neonicotinoids to protect fruit from codling moth or oriental fruit moth is that the insect will take a bite with the products on it. And then again, washing is one part, and then growing of the fruit is another part. And when you think how tiny the larvae are when they're coming from this drop, I mean, basically that size of the egg, the larva, there's a good chance that if there's not a perfect coverage, the larva will never encounter the product and the larva will make it into the fruit. And when larva is inside the fruit, there's no insecticide, none, zero, that will be able to kill the larva. So we have to, the window to control is either we try to kill the egg, and that's when neonicotinoid helps, or we try to kill the larva after this, when it's walking on the fruit, and its larva is inside the fruit in less than 24 hours. Normally it's 1 to 2, but we have seen stragglers just exploring the wort for a day, and then the larva is inside. And when it's inside, nothing can kill it. So no, I would not count on any systemic activity of any of the products. The only systemic activity that we really know, and I know it's worked very well, is with Movento and Movento ability to control woolly apple aphids. If we apply Movento earlier on the season, because we know that we will have a problem with woolly apple aphids, this Movento application will be very effective because Movento is translaminar and systemic within the plant. I don't know about any other product that will be able to provide this kind of protection, and especially not the insects that we use to protect fruit directly. So codling moth, plum curculio, oriental fruit moth, leaf rollers. There's no systemic stuff that actually will work.
Great. Yeah, thanks for emphasizing that. I think sometimes people mistake like, oh, I can put this on there and everything's going to be protected. And that's not the case. And the same way for fungicides. And especially just as a reminder for folks applying mancozeb or captan or sulfur, those are surface only. So they're just coating the surface of the trees and they can be easily washed off. But Greg, I'm glad you brought up woolly apple aphids because I have a woolly apple aphid question for you that just came to my attention yesterday. And the reason why I wanted to bring it up is that I've had a couple people reach out to me here at the farm and elsewhere saying, oh, there's white rot on my tree. And when I get the picture, I see this canker at the lower part of the tree and it's all white. But upon further investigation, it's not a fungus, it's actually woolly apple aphids. So I'm just curious, as far as you mentioned woolly apple aphid control, as far as I'm throwing this out there now just for folks to be aware of, because I'm seeing it here at Freck about these it looks like woolly apple aphids like going to wounds, and their woolliness is basically covering the wound or the canker and giving the appearance of a fungus, but it's not really a fungus. So I'm just curious as far as about woolly apple, what is the timing for woolly apple aphid control? And is it too early? Is it now? Is it later? Or is this something we should be concerned about for whatever reason? I'm not a woolly apple aphid expert, so that's why I'm just curious.
Well, if you see it right now, you should be concerned. I mean, the important part is that, this might be a sign from the infestation from last year.
Okay, good to know.
So the first thing is, because, the webbing, the white webbing will not be washed out, stay there. So the first thing is check if they are live aphids under the white stuff coming from the trees. Another part here is that in the past, the only woolly apple aphid that were able to survive and affect trees in the season were the ones that were overwintering in the ground, on the roots of the trees. Right now, with much warmer winters, woolly apple aphids also is able to survive without going to the ground level. if they don't go to the ground, if they just overwinter in those wounds or under the bark and stuff like this, they are ready to feed, and they are ready to form colonies much earlier than it used to be when they had to walk from the ground to the places on the tree up on the canopy. Another thing is that Lordsban application was killing a lot of those woolly apple aphids. Now, if we don't use Lordsban, we're not affecting them. So the time to control woolly apple aphid is simple and complicated. I know that sounds strange, but the best time to control woolly apple aphid is when you see the first sign of infestation. Saying this, you might be dealing with both the ground colonies, and you might be dealing with the colonies that are originating from the woolies that did never go to the soil. Applying Movento late May, mid-May, again, it's a seasonal thing, should give you a seasonal control because of this translaminar systemic efficacy. When you don't do anything right now, the chance is that you will deal with the much larger woolly apple aphid infestation later on the trees, and then your only option to control woolies is diazinon. Movento will not work later on. I mean, it still does the same, but it works too slow. The growth, the movement of the Movento in the plants is slower and so on. So the way I'm separating those two products, and there are some other products that also have woolly apple aphids mentioned as a suppression, but the way I'm using this is, if you worry about woolies because you had it in the past and you didn't do any control last year, then applying Movento right now is a very good preventive treatment. Don't use diazinon right now. Diazinon has only one application per season, and you want to use diazinon as a rescue treatment. So this will be late June, July. If you see woolies then and they are heavy, that's the time to use diazinon. Again, using Movento later, you might be disappointed, especially if you try to compare Movento now to Movento later. Movento will still work, but it will not be able to reach all the aphids when there is already heavy infestation later in the season. So again, Movento right now, or within the next 2-3 weeks, when you start seeing any symptoms of woolly. Don't do it if you don't see the symptoms. Woolies are easy, and woolly will not kill the tree right away. So don't do it, but if you see them, use Movento now. Keep diazinon for later in the season. But then if you see them later in the season, especially on this petioles on the leaves, on the growth, fresh growth, then diazinon is your only effective option. So,
thank you. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, so that's what. Well, I think the woolies were active because when we looked at them under the dissecting microscope, they were wiggling around. So
it means that those are the ones that survived the winter
yeah,
without going to the ground, and they were basically overwintering on the trees. Another thing that people right now get confused: woolies on peaches are not woolies; they are white peach scale. Okay, and white peach scale will not be on apples. If you see the white fluffy stuff on apples, it's almost certain that this is woolly apple aphids. If you see white fluffy stuff on peaches, it's almost certain it is white peach scale. And those are two different insects. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you made that.
They don't affect both crops. One is for stone fruit, one is for the palm fruit.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, because white peach scale, definitely that is something we also have here at Freck. So I'm glad you brought up that the differentiation between the two. Great. Wow, that was a jam-packed session today. So I really appreciate Shan and Greg being here, giving some really great updates for the beginning of May here. So just as a reminder, we are in the middle of our spring meeting season, and we are going to be on May 8th, we're going to be in Northumberland County at Schlegel Fruit Farm. On May 9th, this Thursday, we're going to be in Bedford County at Ridgetop Orchards. And then next week, on May 14th, we're going to be in Berks County at Freecon Orchards. On May 15th, we're going to be in the Pittsburgh area at Sorgel's Orchards. And then on Thursday, this is next Thursday, we're going to be up in Erie County at Birch Fruit Farm. And that is a morning meeting for the fruit farm. All the other meetings start at 6 p.m. You can visit the Tree Fruit Extension website to get the details as far as where everything is at. Or if you know your extension educator, you could also give them a call to find out the locations, the specifics of the locations. And for any of our New Jersey listeners, just want to give a shout out that I will be attending the New Jersey meetings on May 21st and May 22nd. So the Southern New Jersey meeting, tree fruit meeting, and the Northern New Jersey tree fruit meeting. So for those of you who may be listening and attending those, if there's any burning questions you may have, you want me to address, please contact your extension people, because I'm going to do my best to kind of cover a lot of stuff for you guys. Since Norman Lancet has since retired, he was an awesome tree fruit pathologist. So I know I've got big shoes to fill for those meetings, but we'll get it done. So anyway, say goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening. Until next time. Bye-bye.